So today we'll have Rahul Singh from GlobalMedic, and I know Rahul from a few years ago, maybe decade almost. But it's a great privilege to have him here, and he's going to talk to us about his work leading GlobalMedic. Rahul, we keep introductions short, so I'll let you take it from here.
All right, cool. Hi everybody. I'm gonna run you through probably a half hour, 40 minutes. I'll present some stuff about WASH in the humanitarian setting. So everything I'm going to talk about is going to be through a humanitarian lens. Just keep that in mind. And then I'll open it up for some questions. And look, we can get provocative. We can ask some tough questions. You want to ask me about the impact of shutting down USAID and the number of people that'll die because of it? I mean, we can certainly discuss that. So hopefully we can have a decent discussion. So I founded and run GlobalMedic. I can't really see you, but I'm hoping that you'll put your hand up if you've ever heard of GlobalMedic. So I get some idea to know if you guys have ever heard of it, or you can put comments in the chat to tell me if you've ever heard of us. But what we are is a registered Canadian charity. We're an NGO, right? So we're a registered charity. That's one level higher than a not-for-profit. It means that we can give a donor a tax receipt and they can take that money they donated from us and mark it off their taxes. So whenever you take government money away in the form of taxes, you're held to a much higher level of accountability, right? Like the government wants to make sure that you are doing what you're saying you're doing, especially when you're deflecting funds, away from tax coffers, right? So we've got a few philosophies that we believe in. So right aid, right people, right time. That's like a phrase that we live by, kind of like a mantra that we go to. So it's just something that whenever we talk about programs or how we execute or what we're doing, we always circle back to that. Is it the right aid? Are they the right people? Is it the right time? You should just, and I know it sounds kind of gizmy, like a little gimmicky, but it isn't because everything you should do, especially when it comes to WASH, is making sure that you're doing the right thing, right? Like, so I'm professionally, I'm a paramedic, right? And if I want to administer a drug, we have, right drug, right dose, right patient, right amount, right date, is it expired, right? And right route, how am I giving it? Is it going by a needle? Is it going, into the bone? Is it going into an IV? Is it going up through the nose? Like, how is it being administered? Is it a nebulizer, what have you? So there's a lot of industries that would have, the algorithm of the right. So we just do as well. Um, we are founded by a first responder, so that's me, right? And we're actually a little different. So we've got an oversight board. All of our board are volunteers, which all boards are, right? No charitable board gets paid. But they were all volunteers that have done frontline stuff with us, whether that's packing aid or being on mission or both or what have you. So they've come up through the system, and then they're our oversight board. We have a team of professional humanitarians that manage the program, and we're backstopped by about 9,000 volunteers. So we're like an army of good, right? Now, if we get into some of the hits, you'll see some stats and numbers, so I won't show them to you here. Here's one of our teams that's quite clearly a hurricane, one of the Caribbean islands. We're just walking down the road, about to set up an aid distribution point. But this slide talks about our mission, maximum amount of aid, minimum operating costs. Like if you look at big budgets of big agencies, you've got massive amounts of wasted money, like money that's not as efficiently as spent as it could be. And with us, we try to be the opposite. Like we're always trying to spend as much as we can on the aid product itself, and then getting partners or support for logistics, trucking, distribution, security, that kind of stuff, right? And then when we deploy volunteers out for oversight and verification, it lowers our overall staffing and support costs as well. So a lot of times you'll kind of see this 50-50 blend in a lot of the big projects where it's a $100 million program and 50 million is going into aid, and then the other 50 million is going into everything else. And then the aid part kind of gets compromised and shrunk down and shrunk down. We try to be on target 4-1. So 80% in aid, 20% on everything else. And that 20% of everything else also includes distribution, logistics, and delivery, which is, super hard to maintain, right? Because if you're trying to run, aid into Gaza, do you know how expensive those trucks are? Like, do you know how expensive it is to have people at that level of risk? Your kidnap insurance, your plain risk insurance, if you can get it. Like, so it's very hard to maintain those ratios in the more fluid and austere context, right? Like I'm just politely saying war. So here's some stats. So like if I tell you, hey, we know what we're doing, these are my stats to back up that we know what we're doing. Stats are slightly out of date. You can increase every one, even though the slide was written for this presentation just a few days ago. Um, when I was talking about, what we do, if I say, hey, we're trying to deliver more aid and we're trying to reduce costs, like that goes hand in hand so we can just help more people, right? And then there's a few ways that we can apply different methodologies to our programs to do this, right? So we're always evaluating our program design, like what's the aid we're doing. We always try to lower costs, and lowering costs means bringing in partners. It means leveraging volunteers, and I'll get into that. It means buying in bulk. It means, seeking out donors, right? But these are all things that we're always applying. Now, see, this slide's old too, right? 6,900 dedicated volunteers. This number is up even more. That's a photo of our of about 25 of our people, and you look at them, all walks of life, all genders, all ages, some uniformed responders. You can kind of see on the left. The gentleman on the far left was the anchorman of the evening news for 40 years in the city of Toronto, right? He's on our board. He's been with us forever. The gentleman on the far right with the gray suit, he is the CFO of a gold mining firm, also been deployed for us. Like so, and everyone in between, you see firefighters there. There's like former city councilors. There's drone pilots. Like it's just all walks of life. And this is an event where the woman in the middle is the lieutenant governor at the time, Elizabeth Dowdeswell, her honor, and she was kind enough to present our people with medals. And the reason we do this is we want our people's families to be present, right? So they can see, the sacrifices that folks make, and really get a thank you. Now, for those of you that are interested, there is a wash engineer in that photo. He's on the right side, three or four back. He's got kind of like a purple and white striped tie. He's Sri Lankan or he's Tamil, he's South Indian. Little short, dark hair. He's actually a water technician in the city of Toronto, and he was the Queen Street water purification plant in the East End. It's one of our best water techs. So, like, if you're sitting here going, "Oh, look at all those responders, they're just rescuers. It's nothing to do with water techs." Yeah, that's wrong. Here's like one of our best water techs, and I can count about six of them in that photo that do wash interventions for us as well. Now, I will say our wash interventions are going to be a little bit different than the other agencies out there. So everything that I say to you, I want you to understand we are a very different agency. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying we're better. We're just different, and our approaches are different, and differences are good because you need all humanitarians responding to the world. Here are the 6 programs that we run. Okay, so we don't just do one thing. Please note what's first and foremost: water, right? Like getting people clean drinking water. We think that's the cat's meow. We think that is the only thing that we should be doing if we have very little money. It's the first program that we run. Everything else is terrific, keeping them fed, running a drone program to deliver aid, or understanding, where people have moved, responding to floods, getting people medical care. That's even in our name, and then providing shelter or running hospitals or what have you. But we know that even if we do all the other stuff, if people are drinking contaminated water, they're going to get sick. They're going to die. Their kids are going to die. And kids under 5, they're at tremendous risk. Kids under 2, incredibly high risk. The elderly, massive dehydration, sepsis, death. Like it's just horrid, right? And why does that occur? Drank dirty water, had a waterborne disease, acute watery diarrhea, cannot control fluid or electrolyte imbalance. And if you're too old or too young, the electrolyte imbalance kills you, right? So even if we set a hospital up, like even if I put that medical side or the shelter side, the shelter's got a hospital put up and we're running medical in it. If you come into my hospital with an acute watery diarrheal and I give you like a kind of a treatment plan of, let's say, something to stop your stomach from gurgling, like a loperamide, and then something to kill whatever the bug is, whether it's a flagell or a zithromax or a ciprofloxacin, when you leave and you go home from my hospital, what water are you drinking? Do you think you're going to come back to me tomorrow and now you're just drug resistant? Like, so let's put this in perspective. We fix the water, we fix the problem, right? So for those of you in this field that are like, hey, I'm not sure that WASH is the most important aspect of humanitarianism, yeah, it is. Let me restate that. WASH is the most important aspect because it has the highest impact. It saves the most lives. Without WASH, without access to clean drinking water specifically, people die. Let's just talk about the world 2025. Does anybody in the room think it's going well? I'm glad that's dead silence because it's not going well. So 280 million people in the world are affected by food security. It's a massive uptick and a global trend. Does anyone think that's not happening in Canada? Today, 4.5 times as many people are going to food banks compared to 5 years ago. Like it's not good. 1.8 billion people. That's a B, guys. B, 1.8 billion. That's like a quarter of the world, right? Or 18, 20% of the world. Water scarcity, no access to clean drinking water for a good chunk of them, and the water scarcity for that bigger number. 305 million people will need humanitarian assistance in some form of protection. That number is incredibly, incredibly high. And when we compare it to 2010, like 15 years ago, it was 61 million. And in 2010, we thought 61 million was the end of the world. We didn't think it would go up 500%. Like it's insane. So I know you guys are academics, so you probably like these charts. And I know my team likes these charts, so we threw some together here. This is just showing you that climate-related disasters basically have tripled in the current decade compared to the 80s, compared to like 50 years ago. So if you just kind of look at, where that mark was, sub 100, and now we're up over 300. Um, and then obviously it's 3,000 in the 10-year span. Like this tells you the trend is going in the wrong way. And it's looking like if this trend keeps going in this way, this is a stock market graph. Honestly, if you look at this, this is like Palantir or Nvidia. This is the problem is this is actually people's lives, right? And every time that thing spikes, people die. Like it's insanity. And if you look at the trend in the forecast, by 2030, this goes to 560. That's 560% increase in 50, 60 years. Like it's not good. Let's look at some crazy statistics. I'll leave this slide up for you for a little bit and you can kind of look at it. And if you want, I mean I can share this deck with you or your team and they can absolutely share it with you so you can kind of see it. If you're going to take the slide and put it in one of your presentations, just tag one of the team at GlobalMedic. They did put a lot of work to pull this together, but don't worry, they pulled somebody else's info as well that was vetted. So let's look at economic losses. Okay. Economic losses in the 20-year period, 80 to 99, 1.63 trillion. You see the little circle on the top right? The 20-year period after 2.97 trillion, right? Like almost double. Now, look, you have inflation, so stuff's going to go up in value, but it's not going to go up in value 2 times as fold. And remember, this is a pre-COVID number, right? So it's not like we're talking about a car price today versus 30 or 40 years ago because you expect it to go up, but you don't expect a doubling. Now, the COVID number, the post-COVID number, like when we run these stats 2020 to 2039, I'm really worried about how big of an economic impact it'll be, right? If you look at the total deaths, that's an interesting one because the deaths aren't that much higher, even though the economic losses, right, are. So what does that tell you? I mean, if you're like kind of macro, big picture, are we doing a better job of alerting people? Like when we tell, 25 million people in the path of Typhoon Haiyan in 2005, get the hell out of the way. This is the world's biggest storm, and the bulk of them move. Yeah, we saved lives, right? It was a better intervention. If you have a tsunami indicator that can move people, are you saving lives? If you've got some earthquake notification, are you building better, right? So it's interesting to see that you have basically a 4% bump in your death rate, right? But more than or almost double in your economic impact. And if you look at the total affected, right? 3.25 billion to 4.03 billion. Like that's up what, 25%? Yeah, like 3.2, it like 800 million would be a quarter of that. 800 million on top of that would be 4.03. But you're up 25% in the people that are affected, but your death rate only goes up 3%. So modern medicine, right? Are we doing a better job with trauma and keeping people alive, right? Like, I mean, I'm a paramedic. I'd say 2025, we're a lot better equipped to deal with the gunshot wound or the severe polytrauma in the field compared to when I started, which was 1989, right? And the first thing of that, right? So it's interesting. And then if you look at the reported disasters, right, it's up what, 70%. So it is I mean, look, these are some ugly stats, right? And if you look at the bottom, if you look at the bottom, let's look and see where the increased things are. So wildfires, oh, that's up 50%, right? And remember, this is 2019, right? Can you imagine if we included the stats for the last 2 years, where a country like ours and a country surrounding the Amazon are absolutely massive, right? It's something that's interesting on it, right? Um, Floods, like you'd think floods would be way up, right? Look at them. They're like over 100%, 150%. Extreme temperature. Look at that going from 130 to 432, right? Earthquakes, I would have thought that would have been up a little bit more, but if you look at earthquakes and volcanic activity, it's roughly a very similar percentage, right? It's funny to think that floods are so much higher up and then drought is still higher up because they don't really, you don't think they go hand in hand in that way, but they do, right? Because when you have a massive drought, it's a lot easier for a flood to come in and cause damage, right? So it is, it seems counterintuitive, but it absolutely is not. Now, the only other thing is that mass movement seems to be the dry, it seems to be lowering, which is interesting. It'd be interesting to dig into that more. Okay, so fascinating slide to talk about. This is the ugly slide here. And I want you to understand why this is ugly. Does anybody on the call think that the number of people in need has gone down, or do y'all agree that it's gone up? Because that top line is telling you about need and how many people are in need around the world and how many people need humanitarian assistance. The problem is that yellow slide, the yellow chart, which is funding, right? So as I said, about 300 million people are going to need help this year. And that's hopefully a tick down because last year was like 363 million, but we're hoping with some stabilization in different areas and moving people out of harm's way, the number comes down just a touch. But I don't know. I think what's going to end up happening is the actual number at the end will be higher. It'll probably be around the 360 million. Now let's go back. I was telling you the year 2010 was 60 million. Okay. So it's a 600% increase, 5 to 600%, depending on if you accept the 300 million mark or if you use last year's number of 363, right? The problem is the funding is not keeping pace, right? So there's more people in need, there's bigger caseload, and there's not enough money to keep up with the increased caseload. Like, does anybody think we went up 600% on our ODA, official development assistance programs? Like, do we, you guys must use that term, right? Katana, just wave your hand if you guys do. Yeah, yeah, perfect. Yeah. I mean, does anyone think we've kept pace? Like not at all. Did anybody think we hit that 1% target? The Brits were the only ones to hit zero point 0.7, change of government. That's going to be gone, right? So more people in need, less money to meet them. So what do we need to do? Well, we better innovate, right? We got to lower costs. We got to figure that out. Now, why do you think we exist on that mantra, right? This is it. This is the reason that we say lower costs, leverage volunteers, do everything you can to lower these costs to help more people because the world statistically is showing us that if we don't, we fail. And when we fail, sorry, people die. Okay, here's where we've worked. Um, Kind of cool, right? We've been almost everywhere if you think about it. All that stuff in red are the wars we've responded to. Everything else is disasters. Do you see where the wars are? Like, isn't that kind of weird that the wars are like right there? So geopolitically, that tells you something. I mean, there's poor little Sri Lanka, below India by itself in red, but everything else is kind of like you fold the earth in half like a pizza, and well, there's your wars, right? Okay, so let's talk about wash or water, right? And we'll get into some of this. So clean water, as I said, by far our most important response, like clean drinking water, right? It's more efficient and effective to prevent illness than treat illness. You remember that example that I gave you? I'm running the hospital in Bangladesh, and every day people are coming back to us sick because they're drinking dirty water, and we're giving them the meds to treat the waterborne disease, but we're not treating the water. So even if I have free healthcare, even if I have free doctors provided by the local government and all the medicines are free, and nothing's free in this world, right? Somebody had to donate it, somebody had to get it, somebody had to make it. Even when we run healthcare at $4 or $5 per patient, which is incredibly low, right? Let's double it. Let's say $10 a patient, right? Well, for $20, I could get them clean water for a year. What am I going to do? Keep spending 10 to treat them twice a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week? How many times are they going to keep coming back to me? So which one is better? Fix the water and fix the problem, or just give them an illness and then have them become drug resistant? So if there's anyone that thinks the latter is the way to go, like we can stop the discussion right now and kind of come back to basics. It's preventing the illness rather than treating the illness, right? And look, we have a good output. Like we've done a ton to get people clean drinking water. And even in our system, we've changed our model to a family emergency kit model from the previous model because we always want to evolve and change. So let's look at that. So we do two types of things, point of source and point of use. So a point of source water purification unit, I'm not sure if it's a term you guys use still, but you're treating the source water, right? The well, the local well, the river, the cistern, the big tank where everybody gets it. Does anyone think that's super efficient? It's not. It isn't. And it's an easy way to get cross contamination. So look at the way we treat point of source, right? Here's some photos. So top left, that's us with World Central Kitchen, very famous group out of America, good friends of ours. We go everywhere with them. We put like portable units in that. That's a $1,500 solution, guys. Like it's not a big deal. That's a carbon filter, a sediment filter, an ultraviolet light, and a pump in the middle, right? That's going to be 12 liters a minute. And we'll pop those into feeding centers so the chefs that are cooking food have clean drinking water to cook with. You remember Typhoid Mary? You guys must tell that story. We don't want Typhoid Mary. That's why we do it, right? Think of the impact of that little $1,500 unit. And that's a volunteer. That the guy on the right, in ours, he's a retired cop. He's not a water technician, right? But yet he's been all over the world installing those units. So, and teaching the locals how to do it. So then there's another photo with the gray, top right next to the World Central Kitchen one. That's how we carry units in. You can see they look like they're going into some chaotic scene, right? And then on the right, do you remember I told you about the water technician in the photo getting his medal? Well, that's him right there, with the glasses on. And he's just checking the same kind of piece of kit, right? This one's a little bit different. It's made in Turkey. We're installing this one in Turkey. You kind of see it's a little bit different design, but same idea. Bottom left, same thing. Point of source. There's the tank. It's the little village. People are coming. That's in the Philippines. That's the water we're cleaning out, the tank that it's going into. So the open, we're never going to put clean water in an open container, cross-contamination, right? We're always going to put it in a closed container. People can drink it right away. Look at the bottom, big picture in the middle now. This one is, I don't even know where this photo's from. It's funny, it could be Nepal. Yeah, I think it's Nepal. Or it could be Myanmar actually too. But do you see the case that they're carrying on top? That's the case when it's open. And that's the unit inside. We're purifying source water and we're giving it to people to go and take home. So this is good, but it's not great. Okay. Here's why it's not. Okay. Here's why it's good. You're getting people clean water. You're making a difference. Fantastic. Your cost per liter is way better than bottled water. Everybody agree? Like when I hand you a bottle of water, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars. I have to truck that. I have to ship it. I have to put it on a helicopter. I have to get it in. It's just too expensive. It doesn't work, right? And what do you do with the bottle when it's done? Is it going to end up like you're just going to throw it in the garbage, right? So bottled water, not a good solution, right? This reasonable solution. Why is this bad? Well, if I come with a bucket and I'm the beneficiary and I pick up this water and I now carry it home, can I cross-contaminate it? Well, of course I can, right? What's my water storage like? Do I have a lid? Um, how fast can I drink that water without the cross-contamination occurring? Like, there's just too much risk, right? So we want to mitigate the risk. Now, sometimes this is it. Like this is the only thing we can do, or we get this running on day one while we're bringing everything else in because we want to get as much water as we can, but we know this is not a durable or long-term solution. Do you guys use terms like that, Kaitana, like the durable solutions and more permanent stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes if you hear me say that, it's a very common term in the industry. It's usually more towards refugees and durable solutions for them. But so this is good, but it's not perfect, right? And then if you look at KPIs with cost per liter, how much liters are you getting out? What's your cross contamination rate, et cetera? These are the KPIs that you run. So the worst part about this is the day that I shut down this operation, the earthquake may as well have happened that day again, because guess what? Those people don't have access to clean water. There's no exit strategy, right? And it doesn't matter what their water was before, right? We get this argument all the time. And this is the biggest divider between humanitarians who are coming in on an emergency response and development, right? We'll have this argument of, but if they didn't have a toilet before and you give them a toilet today, the neighbors will get upset because they didn't have their home destroyed, and now these people are doing better in your recovery program than the neighbors. You're going to create hostility in the community. So when we hear that about, but they didn't have clean water before, we just stop the conversation. As humanitarians, we're not coming in there and not providing clean drinking water. That's not going to happen, right? But it's an interesting argument that we as humanitarians have with that nexus towards development. So when you're faced with that argument, just like take a breath and be like, no, people have a right to clean drinking water. We're going to get it to them. The worst part of this type of program is when we shut it down, if there is no durable permanent solution, the earthquake happened that day again because they just don't have access to clean water. That's why we don't love these solutions. We still use them. We know when they're useful, but we're not so in love with these solutions that we think this is the only thing we can do, right? Another thing we do with these solutions, we try to leave them behind. Because guess what? Those countries are going to get more and more earthquakes or more and more people displaced by angry young men with guns. And if we can have local people trained on how to use them and redeploy them, you've got more capacity in there. So let's now talk about point of use water purification units. Um, this is the cat's meow as far as I'm concerned, because the idea is we want to give it to families and install it at the point of use, right? So in their home, whether the home's a house or a tent or a shelter, right? We want to give it to them where they're going to use it, right? Now, there's a couple ways we can do this. We can do chemicals, right? You can see on the top left, water purification tablets, right? Um, 40% of people that you give a tablet to won't use it. Might tell you they will, but you go back and ask them, they won't use it. And often what happens too much is open container, right? Cross-contamination and the chlorine in, like all these water tabs are basically chlorine, right? The chlorine residual is gone and people can get sick. Is it better than nothing? Absolutely. Is it the perfect solution? Absolutely not, right? So if you have $1 million to spend or $10 to spend, if you think that's your best way, I'm going to argue with you and say no. Bottom right, those are sachets. We deal with turbid water. So clear water, tablets, turbid water, you kind of see the jars on the top right, how we go from that swampy muck to stirring it around to the thing on the right. The photo on the left, can you kind of see how we're pouring it in with like a little cloth, right? To take the, like almost like a flock or a collector to take the dirt off, right? Look at the people in the background. Like that's Pakistan. That's a flooded area. The water source that we're dealing with is going to be absolute garbage. So sometimes we got to do, pre-treatment, chemicals, flock, all that stuff. And guys, I'm not an expert on that stuff. Like I know what the terms mean, but like I'm not going to be the guy telling you how to do any of this stuff, right? But I'm just saying these are good solutions, not great solutions. This this bad boy is our solution now. It's not perfect, but we think it's better than everything else. And I'll tell you why. 97 out of 100 people actually used it. Sorry, 99 out of 100 when we do the surveys, right? It means everybody's using it. Do you see how it's two buckets, right? So you pour dirty water in the top and gravity pulls it through a ceramic filter. And that ceramic filter acts as like a mechanical, killing machine to all those protozoa or all that gunk, right? 0.02 micron. And it just slices everything to pieces, rendering them, harmless, which means they still end up in your system, but they don't take any action. They're dead, right? Just like UV light would kill them. This is just more mechanical. Did I mention gravity here? There's no moving parts, there's no electricity, right? Because let's face it, nobody's going to have electricity where we are, right? Or, that's kind of the thing that we face, right? So then because you pour it in the top and gravity pulls it through, you can fill that top bucket, 15 liters. Gravity will keep pulling it through, and then that bottom bucket will be stored. There's a lid, right? No mosquitoes, no open source. So like this is interesting. Now, when mom wants the clean drinking water for her kid, she just touches that spigot, right? So to us, this is the best solution, right? UNICEF a few years ago said, can you come up with a $20 version of that US? We got this down to 12, right? Like this is fantastic. And it'll work for about a year, right? 9 months to 15 months, depending on. Now, you see the box on the right and all the boxes in behind? That's the family emergency kits. That's the main unit. We nest everything in it and we put it together. So there's soap, toothbrush, toothpaste, there's a solar light, because these are solving problems that we know families face, right? Hmm. In the chat, there's a cute little video. For some reason, it's not playing from this. I'm going to see if it does here, but it's not. So I'm just going to keep going. In the chat, you can watch that video. Aloysia, do you want to play it right now? You want to try and see if you can do it?
I don't have it uploaded on my end, but I'll add it to the chat for folks.
Yeah, no worries. So you guys can watch it. It's like a minute and a half. It explains what's in the family emergency kit. So, okay, let's explain now why the family emergency kit is good and how we drove the price down. So let's look at some of the photos here. Here are some volunteers that are assembling the family emergency kit. Okay. They are putting the cartridge made by a company called Rainfresh. This is the same cartridge that UNICEF uses. It's sold around the world. You can go buy a similar cartridge like this in Canadian Tire, right, for your household units. But in order to lower costs, right, I don't want to pay the company any more than we have to. So they make the cartridge. We then package the cartridge. You can see we bubble wrap it. We put it in that protective box, right? Below them is a bunch of students. Now, like, look at the juxtaposition here, right? These are kind of retirees up top. These are students down below, right? I think the one guy's like in the fire service school, and the other guys are like high school kids. Remember I said right aid, right people, right time? It's like right on our wall. This is what we believe in. So here they are assembling the boxes, right? Now, the reason we use all this volunteer labor, and it's not a small amount. We're 49,000 hours a year of volunteer time. Like, do the math on that. If we paid everybody $20 an hour, can you imagine? Like, that's like almost $1 million, right? 980, you know? So look at it in the field, right? This unit is durable, it works, it doesn't change the taste, right? People in the field, if I hand them a tablet, they'll say, "You're trying to sterilize me. You don't want me to have kids." Honest, this is what people say. They don't like the smell, they won't use it. In this one, the people use, and because there's containment, the water doesn't get cross-contaminated. Now, this is Laurel, bottom right, right? She's assembling an older version of our unit. And look at all the moms in the room. She's in Myanmar, right? Burma, if you want to call it Burma, but she's in Myanmar. Look at the moms. They're fascinated. They want to understand what this is because now they know they're going to be able to give their kids clean water, right? Right in the house, or what's left of their house from the cyclone that just hit and we were there, right? Okay. So we know this works, right? To date, 361,700 FEKs, 56 countries. Like look at them. Look at everywhere they've gone, around the world, right? You remember that map I showed you way earlier with the war right in the middle? Look at these right in the middle in a war zone. Look at them all over. Why do you think we're in the Caribbean islands? That's probably hurricanes, right? Why are we over in South Asia? Is that volcanoes? Is that earthquakes? Is that typhoons? Like, what is it, right? A bunch of war zone and displaced there through Africa up into Ukraine. Like we know this solution works. And the key is to kind of just keep driving price down. And it's interesting, right? We want to get it to you in box form because it's like IKEA. Anybody go shop at IKEA, right? Flat packing, move it efficiently, get as much aid as I can into that box, right? So here you go. Here's a guy who's just gotten his aid. He's like riding his bike home and he's going to go set it up, right? Here's a bunch on a little boat in India going out to villages that are affected by the cyclone or the flooding in this case. This was mass flooding in Kerala, right? This is going on a donkey up a mountain in Nepal, right? And there it is. There's the aid, there's the aid going up, right? This is us working in the Caribbean. It's funny, you see the little buckets? It's filled with food aid, right? And then the FEKs are there. The reason we hand this out is mom can then use that bucket to scoop her collected rainwater or her well water or her source water and pour it into our unit. We try to do that together. This is going on to that big that Coast Guard cutter, and it's going to go out to some of the islands, right? And how it is. Okay, this one's cool. I got to be honest, I was a little nervous when they were moving it this way because I didn't want our stuff to break, right? This is Vanuatu. I think that's Australian Army. I think that's AirCav for them. And they're dropping off the net, touching down a bunch of our kits for us, right? When my person told me they were using helicopters, I kind of thought they were going to put it inside the helicopter. I wasn't too happy when I saw this, but not one broke. So, that was all right. Now, this one gets me a little nervous as well because we're throwing off one boat in the Caribbean. Guys are catching it, stacking it, and we'll hand them out to families. This is why we do it right here. Okay. That kid in Myanmar didn't have clean water before, right? If we go back a few photos, his mom, like I think that's his dad behind him, but his mom and him are sitting in line getting that instruction session from Laurel, and now he's got clean water. And if you think of the impact on his life, not getting sick, like just, all the health impact, all the financial impact. I mean, think of it. Kid gets sick because he has dirty water. Mom and dad, one of them's got to take a day off work, probably dad. No income. You got to get to a hospital, got to get to a doctor, got to pay for that. Got to get him some medicine. Got to pay for that. So family income's now diminished, right? So what's he not going to get? Food? Okay, but he needs food to grow. He needs the nutrients, right? No clean water. Do you see the spin-off effects that occurs? Now clean water. Now, honestly, if that cost me 12 US dollars to make, and I can get it there for another 3 or 4 because we leverage all the partnerships, and we can give a family clean drinking water sub 20 US for the year, like that's a great KPI, and as Caetano pointed out, key performance indicator, right? This is literally the cat's meow. Okay, let's now just switch over to soap. Talk about soap as part of the wash program. That way, I'm not just focused on water. So, wash needs are highest among people that are displaced, facing poverty, or homeless. I'm not going to argue that. That's an easy comment to make, right? If you want to prevent cholera and diarrhea and all this stuff, soap's a key aspect of it. Clean drinking water, good sanitation, right? So if we just look at it from a macro point of view, remember, what did we look at for water? We said, if I get you clean water, I'm going to keep you out of the hospital. Makes sense. If I get you clean water in a point of use model, I'm going to do better for you than a point of source model. So we drilled down into it and we came up with a focused solution just to get you clean drinking water in the most efficient possible way. We use volunteers to lower that cost. We buy in bulk to lower that cost. We buy those buckets here. We drill the buckets ourselves. You'd see that in that video if we got to see it, right? So all aspects of this are to drive costs down. When we drive costs down, we have profit. To us, profit means we help more people, right? If we have $1 million and we got to spend it to a company and we're paying $60 a unit, but we can drive that price down to 12, we're going to help 4 times as many people, right? 5 times total, like it makes sense. Spend less, help more, right? So same macro views apply here. If we know that soap is a solution, right? Doesn't it make sense that if we just push more soap out into the world and get it to the right places, we'll help people and lower all those other indicators? That's why we put soap in the family emergency kit. Kind of makes sense, right? So let's talk about how we lower the cost of soap. Do you know the ton of soap goes into landfill every year? Like it's insanity, right? It's absolute insanity. So these are women in Cambodia. They're employed, they're getting jobs to make bars of soap. You can kind of see some of the bars of soap on the top right hand, right? We call the program the Soap Revolution. I always wanted to lead a revolution, so now we do the Soap Revolution. It's cute. Those women have recycled that soap. So how do you recycle soap? So number one, you get it from hotels, right? Everybody go to a hotel, use a little bar of soap once, and it just sits there, and you throw it out in the landfill. Nope, they throw it in bins, they collect it, they send it, and it'll go to places like this, and women clean it up, melt it, reprocess it, put it out into bars like this. They get jobs. Fascinating. That's great. We get the soap and we give it out to poor families, right? We then pack it in one of two ways. It either goes in these Ziploc bags, which goes into our FEKs, as you can see, or we put them into these cute little recycled cardboard boxes and it goes into our food bank system. And then families that, don't have necessarily access to soap actually get it for free. You remember early on in my presentation, I said 4.5 times as many families were going to food banks today compared to 5 years ago. So look, they have to make this really hard choice, right? Do I pay my rent or do I feed my family? So let's go to a food bank. You think they're buying soap? They're not. These are one of the first things to cut from a household budget. Cleaning supplies, household items, hygiene items, soap, shampoo, deodorant, right? Like it's a tough one. So if we, on a macro view, can take millions of bars, I'm not talking a box here, right? We're talking millions of bars and leverage volunteers to help us repack. And then we push them out through existing mechanisms and systems like food banks. We ask our friends at Air Canada or FedEx or other folks to use their networks to move this aid, right, across our country, just like we asked them, to move those family emergency kits. Like, you remember I said we want to leverage partners just like we leverage volunteers? Last year, our friends at Airlink gave us 900,000 US dollars worth of free airline tickets and cargo movement. They moved about 283,000 pounds. You can do the math. Those things are only 10 pounds, right? They moved 28,000 of them for us, right? Free air freight. So in order to drive costs down, you leverage everyone, you partner with everyone. And programs like this make sense. So for us, every time we order a can, we get like 290,000 bars. We used to do like a can a year. Then it was like a can a quarter. I want to do a can a month, right? Like we just want to keep putting zeros and expanding on what we do because now we can fill the needs, domestic and abroad, different mechanisms, some inside the family emergency kit, some right to the food bank. It's not that hard to go find the families in need because they're already coming to those spots, right? And then we're just providing them the right aid. Remember that right at the beginning, right aid, right people, right time. Programs like this, it's the right aid. The FEK, anybody want to argue with me that that's not the right aid? That's very much the right aid. Then we just find the right people, and then obviously we get it to them at the right time. That is the end of my formal presentation. I will open the floor to any questions, and I hope everyone is still awake.